Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about, is remote employment a sustainable practice? My name is Dr. Mary Streit. I'm a professor of psychology at North Central University, and I'd like to thank you for being here with me today. So, a few studies to date have examined the developmental progression of virtual employment over time and whether or not this type of work arrangement is a sustainable practice. So in this study, individuals with different lengths of time spent working remotely were compared and contrasted to see if any behavioral patterns emerged that were associated with longevity or the sustainability of remote work. So for this study, an anonymous online survey was hosted by Qualtrics, and there were 112 respondents were recruited, and there were 28 participants who were purposely sampled using quota group sampling for the 4 different lengths of time spent working remotely. And those 4 different categories of lengths of time were less than 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and 10 years or more. Oops, sorry about that. And the minimum amount of time spent working virtually each week was set at 20 hours or more. And participants were vetted by Qualtrics and provided with monetary incentives for their participation in this survey. So the main research question that I had was, do virtual employees engage in different types of behaviors by length of time spent working remotely? So are you seeing different patterns in individuals who have less than 3 years versus those who have 10 years or more? That was really my interest, to see if those behaviors are going to be conducive to making this type of work arrangement more sustainable or more likely to last. So according to the first hypothesis I had, was based on the spillover theory of work-life balance, and I was hypothesizing that individuals who have been working online for longer periods of time would be significantly more likely to have firm boundaries in place around their work behaviors in terms of when, how, and where they work in order to prevent this negative work-home spillover interference. So they're going to have strategies that they're using to create firm boundaries. So that's the first hypothesis. The second hypothesis was more based on the predictions of social networking theory, where individuals who've been working remotely for longer periods of time are going to be more likely to seek out interactions and social contact with others, both in and outside of work, for both work and non-work related reasons. So they're going to try to maintain those social networks and those connections with people as much as they can. And then the third hypothesis is that individuals who've been working virtually for longer periods of time are going to also be more likely to report feeling satisfied, committed, and productive on the job. Okay, I'm going to skip the fourth hypothesis. We don't have that much time. Okay, so again, I'm looking at this first hypothesis, looking at the creation of firm boundaries around work and whether or not we're seeing differences in the patterns of these types of behaviors by length of time. And ta-da, we did. So individuals who've been working longer remotely were the most likely to spend time in the actual office, which is interesting. So it could be related to their responsibility levels, or maybe that they want to also have that actual FaceTime contact. Monday was the most popular day to actually be physically in the office, and Friday was the least popular. Work hours were more structured and routine. In the office between 7 to 9 a.m. starts and 3 to 5 p.m. endings. And individuals with more than 5 years of remote work, where they're doing both, were the most likely to report later start and end time. So they're kind of doing things a little differently than everyone else. Again, suggesting that this is correlated with higher levels of responsibility at the job. They kind of are creating their own rules. Okay, and similarly, Monday was the least likely day to work remotely or virtually, and Friday was the most likely. So those findings really kind of all lined up. And Sunday was the least likely to be reported as a virtual work day, specifically by individuals with more time working in a remote type of arrangement. So this sounds like a boundary issue, that they're creating this boundary here where they're not working on Sunday. Similar patterns of work were noted for virtual days working remotely. However, kind of contrasting the earlier finding, individuals, again, with more time, 5 or more years working remotely, are more likely to start working earlier. So when they're working in the office, they're coming in late, but when they're working remotely, they're starting earlier. So again, seeing different patterns here by the amount of time spent working remotely. All of the participants, regardless of the amount of time, report that working both in and out of the office is ideal. So that was a 97% overwhelming majority. Pretty much everyone said that you need to have both. 85% said they report sticking to this daily routine, so they definitely are creating these boundaries. 55% say they report working in a separate home office. So again, having a physical boundary between work and home, where you can maybe close the door or do other things. And those who have been working 5 years or more were the most likely to report having this home office set up where it was separate, and they were more likely to be satisfied. Where people with less than 5 years are more likely to be working in the living room or in the bedroom or something along those lines where they don't have a separate workspace and they weren't as happy about it. Okay, 56% said they don't take sick days. I was surprised by that. However, those with 5 or more years of practice doing this were taking those days. And they also were saying that this has changed. Like they learned, when I'm sick, I take a sick day. Whether I'm home or not, doesn't matter. Similarly, 40% report that taking vacation days has changed. So they're taking it now. And specifically those with 5 or more years of remote work, saying that this has changed and now they're taking their vacation. So I think what this is kind of hinting at here is that people need to behave similarly and have these boundaries, otherwise they can get burnt out. Interestingly, that when they're taking vacation, however, those with more time working remotely are also checking their emails. So they're on vacation, but they're still kind of staying in touch. Almost 60% say they take a lunch hour. And again, those who've been doing this longer, 5 years or more, are the most likely to say they do it now. And also, they're also more likely to report eating alone, however. So generally speaking, it seems as if this hypothesis is supported, that it's critical to actively make use of strategies to create strong boundaries around work, specifically when working from home, with things like taking lunch, taking sick time, taking vacation days, having a regular daily routine, a separate designated workspace, also not engaging in household chores and other things as a way to promote the sustainability of remote employment and prevent burnout. And I think that's very key and critical, especially in our world right now. Okay, so the second hypothesis was looking at the drive for social connection and social networking theory, with participants with 5 years of 5 or more years being more likely to seek out social connection with others, regardless of whether or not it is work-related or synchronous in live real time. So when they were asked if working virtually has negatively impacted their feelings of connection, about 46% said that it had, and the slight majority, or about 54%, said it had no effect. So even though the majority said it had no effect, a good percentage said it was making them feel a little bit less connected. And interestingly enough, those who have been working remotely for 5 years or more were the most likely to report this change or effect. So there definitely is a bit of a negative downside socially. And in terms of companionship, 72% said that they report eating lunch alone, with those with 5 or more years working remotely more likely to do this, where individuals with less time report going out to lunch with others, or a good mix of both. So definitely some indication of a little bit of social isolation and withdrawal among people who've been working longer for remotely. Outside professional contacts. So when they're asked how often they meet live and in person with local community groups or professional organizations, those who've been working virtually for longer periods of time were twice as likely to report doing so, with weekly being the most popular, and for people with less time, less than 5 years working remotely, being bi-weekly or every other week. Okay, interaction with coworkers. So when they're asked how often they interact with their coworkers in real time, those with 5 or more years were twice as likely to report doing so daily, where those with less time were saying weekly. So definitely more interaction here going on. The type of social interaction, those with five years or more are saying it's more synchronous, real time, than those with less time spent working remotely. Now, when asked if they communicate with coworkers for non-work related kind of social reasons, 66% that this hasn't really changed, but a third did say so, with less interaction for purely social reasons. And on the same token, those who are interacting for purely social reasons say it makes them feel more connected and part of the team. So you're seeing less of this, and as a result, probably also less feelings of connection and feeling part of the team. When looking for contact with their boss or supervisor, most people said it was about right, but those with 5 or more years of virtual or remote employment wanted more contact. So they want more interaction with their supervisors. And those who had 5 years or more of virtual employment were almost twice as likely to prefer the phone as a method of communication over email or texting or Skyping. I thought that was interesting. And then asynchronous contact, those with 5 or more years were more likely to report more frequent asynchronous interaction. So again, this kind of gradual withdrawal from that in real life interaction going on, more asynchronous. And then when asked if they prefer to communicate with coworkers asynchronously, 79% said yes. And those with 5 or more years working virtually said that this was a change for them. So they're seeing more asynchronous communication and a slight preference for this. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword. So they're saying they are feeling more isolated and disconnected, but at the same time they prefer this asynchronous kind of contact as well. Also, respondents who've been working virtually for 5 years or more are more likely to report working in a public place. So there again seems to be this kind of need for being in around people and interacting with them, but maybe for whatever work-related reasons, they don't have the time to have that kind of interaction, less socialization, less of those types of interactions. So this hypothesis seems supported, that they're seeking out these types of interactions. However, they're not necessarily getting those needs met. Okay, and then the final hypothesis was looking at job satisfaction, performance, and commitment to see if that's changing over time. And honestly, the data suggests that job performance was high and is higher working online, as well as job commitment and also job satisfaction. So it was really high all across the board here, with higher levels reported amongst those who've been working for 5 years or longer. However, there were ceiling effects noted, so it seems like this group in particular of individuals were just very happy and committed and working really hard. So overall, it appears as if virtual employment has positive benefits for employees and that it may lead to sustainability of this. Future directions overall need to look to further explore the behaviors of remote employees who are happy and productive, and have been doing so for 5 years or more in order to see whether or not there are any individual differences among these types of workers and any further evidence-based practices to consider to allow for the sustainability of work, virtual or remote work. I think this is even more critical today than ever before because we're seeing so many more people working remotely and virtually. So we really have to think about what are the implications of this, and is this something that we're going to do long term, and if so, how can we do it better? Okay, thank you so much.